the heart of all great movies are great characters. So today I'm going to give you my picks for my 10 favorite movie characters of all time. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your picks for your favorite movie characters of all time. Of course, all of our lists are going to be totally different because we've all seen different movies and resonated with different characters. Also, there's a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 10 more of my favorite movie characters of all time. If you enjoyed this video and want more content from Sean Chandler Talks About, go ahead and check out my Patreon page at the link down below in the description. And let's get started. Kicking things off at number 10 is Luke Skywalker, the central protagonist of the original Star Wars trilogy. And the original Star Wars trilogy was a modern retelling of classic mythology, Joseph Campbell stuff, the hero's journey, and our hero on that journey was Luke Skywalker. He starts off as a simple farm boy that's incredibly whiny. He learns that he has this very potent legacy and decides to go off on this journey. Throughout the trilogy of films, he fails, he's impulsive, he's impatient, but he continues to learn from his mistakes, even if they cost him his hand at one point in time. And by the end of that trilogy, through his hope, his optimism, he's able to overcome the trials and challenges that his own father failed at, and in doing so, awakens Anakin Skywalker out of the Darth Vader haze that he's in and redeems his father. It's an incredibly powerful story that I absolutely love. Now, this character would be much higher up on this list, except that the Star Wars sequels exist and knocked him back a bit. Number 9, Indiana Jones, the quintessential cinematic adventurer of the last 50 years. He's not really a hero. He's not really all that good of a guy, but he's off on these exciting adventures, raiding tombs for the sake of making a name for himself, constantly getting in over his head and making up his plan as he goes along. But what I think makes these films even more powerful than they might seem at face value is that he really does have a potent character arc throughout the films, especially when you realize Temple of Doom is a prequel. In that film, he's using a child and taking him on this dangerous adventure. He's threatening to kill a woman. He's in it entirely for the sake of glory until he has to save this village, and it kind of softens him up a little bit. Then he kind of helps the United States government in the next film, in the chronology, Raiders of the Lost Ark, battling Nazis to stop them from getting some item, but at its core, he thinks he's just getting some great find, and when you get to Last Crusade, he's gone on this big journey, and his motivation is no longer to make a name for himself, but it's to save his father, and by the time you get to the end of that original trilogy, he's letting go of the treasure for the sake of family and doing the right thing, and he actually has quite the potent journey when you realize just how scummy he was at the earliest times we see him as an adult in this chronology. So it's such fun to see him battling Nazis, going on these adventures, but there's also a nice bit of heart in there. Next up is Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Now, this is a character I wouldn't have thought to include on this list had I done this about 3 months ago, but I recently rewatched Forrest Gump while doing a ranking of the IMDb top 15 and realized that he has one of the best character arcs in cinematic history. You see him at the beginning of the film as this soldier that just wants to die in war because that's his family's legacy, and that's all he really knows. And when he doesn't die in war because of Forrest Gump, it creates this incredibly complex dynamic throughout them where he becomes this bitter person because of what the war cost him and the state that Forrest Gump has left him, while at the same time he knows Forrest Gump did the right thing, so he cares deeply about him in a different sense. But through Forrest Gump's naive optimism and friendship, Lieutenant Dan actually softens a bit and commits that if Forrest Gump ever becomes a ship boat captain, he'll go be his first mate. And he actually follows up on that promise in the film, sending them off on another one of these Forrest Gump adventures where finally Lieutenant Dan's able to process through everything that happened and realize that there is happiness outside of the destiny that he thought he had for himself. All of it leading to this simple moment where he thanks Forrest Gump
never thanked you for saving my life.
Jumps into the water, and it's just such a satisfying moment. And then you get to the end of the film at Forrest Gump's wedding, and it's just so satisfying when all you see is Lieutenant Dan walk up and smile, and it tells you everything you need to know. It's just such a great arc for a character, especially for all being in a single movie, in him not being the lead. Number 7, Caesar from the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy. Now, when Rise of the Planet of the Apes came out, I thought it seemed like a stupid idea for a movie, so I didn't even go and see it in the theater, but I heard some murmurs that it was actually pretty good, so I rented it as soon as I could and fell in love with it almost instantly. And at the center of what made it work is that the movie was actually about Caesar. I assumed it was going to be about James Franco, but he's the side character in the character arc. The journey is for Caesar, who starts as this ape that has the stuff that makes him more intelligent, and he's trying to live with humans. And then through a series of incidents that take place, he has to step into leadership and become a much harsher being than he was before. No! All of this leading to the next film where Matt Reeves takes over and starts telling these very complex stories where there are villains, there are people that do villainous things, but the central conflict really is about the fact that these different factions have competing values. And at the core of it, the person trying to hold it all together is Caesar. And even though he's our hero and our protagonist that is saving the day, he's someone that also has to overcome his own biases, his own prejudice throughout the film. And it's just such an amazing arc when you watch where he started in that first film to where he ends up by the last one, and how important his character is because of what he's able to do. Then we have Sarah Connor from the Terminator movies. This is another example of where a character goes on this just tremendous arc throughout the film. She kicks off in the original Terminator film as just a waitress, a totally normal, boring person that realizes that she's incredibly important to the future because of her son. By the time we get to the second movie, she's been kind of driven totally mad in her attempts to stop the apocalypse from happening, and in certain ways loses her humanity, and through her son is restored and realizes she's kind of turned into a Terminator herself, and he brings back that humanity. And then jump forward a long time, we get to Terminator Dark Fate. I am actually a defender of this film, and one of the reasons is I think they did really interesting stuff with her character, where you see her as a matured Sarah Connor who's lived with the reality of this for decades, knowing that she stopped an apocalypse and nobody knows about it, and it came at incredible cost to her personally. But you also see her not really in a crazed state. You see a hardened Sarah Connor that's true to who she was in Terminator 2, but not the psycho that kind of actually did need to be locked up a little bit there. And so because of all that, I love the journey of this character and what they were able to do with her. In 5th place is the T-800 from Terminator 2. We got a double feature of Terminator characters here, and the thing that elevates Terminator 2 so much is they were able to have fantastic characters, one of them being the harsh killing machine that learns the value of human life. In James Cameron having this idea of what if the Terminators were learning computers, so if they spent enough time around humans, they would start to comprehend them a little bit more, creates an actual character arc for the T-800, all because of these interesting relationships with John Connor, even with Sarah Connor. As you go through it, you have this punk kid teaching a Terminator how to be cool, how to be funny, and not to kill people. And it leads to so many, of course, iconic action scene moments where he's holding the minigun, or without killing anyone, or just delivering one-liners.
Hasta la vista, baby.
But ultimately leading to that final moment where Terminator realizes that he has to die in order to stop his line from continuing onward. So he lowers himself down, even though he can't self-terminate, and just the simple line of,
I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do.
incredibly powerful, man tears every time, so of course he's on this list. Number 4, Tony Stark, of course from the MCU. Naturally, I'm a massive fan of the MCU, and the heart and soul of the MCU up to this point in time has been Tony Stark. The entire universe kicked off with the original Iron Man. And when you watch that movie and you just see where Tony Stark was as this war profiteer womanizer to where he ends up as a family man that wants nothing but to stay at his cabin with his daughter, immediately that's a compelling arc. He was always on point, whether it's the humor, the sarcasm, or seeing him as this very broken protagonist that is brilliant. He's brazen, he's willing to go out there and do crazy things, but he doesn't know that he's his own worst enemy, and so often he is the cause of the problems that he must solve. And that in and of itself is compelling because he changes as he goes along. He thinks differently. One of the reasons I love Captain America Civil War is because why on earth would Tony Stark be so much for these Accords or think this is the right thing to do? Because of all the mistakes he's made over the previous films where his impulsiveness had dire consequences. Then all of this leads up into Infinity War and Endgame, where you see a Tony who's incredibly broken because of what happened, as well as finding peace in leaving it all behind, which is the thing that he'd been trying to do for quite a bit in the MCU. And he's married, he has a child, and they're able to find a scenario where he can have that happy ending of peace for 5 years and at the same time kill him off in a way that gives him a heroic send-off.
I am Iron Man.
That would have huge ramifications for the MCU moving forward and a bunch of these different characters. Such a satisfying conclusion and an amazing arc. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your picks down below in the comment section. Of course, all of our lists are going to be wildly different. That's the fun part. Let's just have a fun conversation about our favorite movie characters. Also, remember there is a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 10 more of my favorite movie characters. So a bunch of people you think, hey, why isn't this person there? What about this person? A lot of those characters are probably on that list. In third place is Ellen Ripley of the Alien franchise. Now, the reason Aliens is one of my absolute favorite films of all time is because its predecessor, Alien, is a great film that built a wonderful foundation, and then James Cameron just built on top of it with expanding the action, the scope, the size, and everything, but also building on the character of Ripley and what the events of the first film and what happens between the two films would do to her as a person. So in the original film, she's kind of space truckers. They stumble across these aliens because of the corporation and the manipulation there. She happens to be the final survivor because of her wits and what she's able to do. And then it jumps forward 57 years, and everyone she's known is long gone, dead, old, if any of them are still alive, in which case she's all alone, and no one believes her about what happened until she's taken on this adventure back to the planet to try and save the colonists from whatever happened there, and in the process ends up becoming the surrogate mother to this little girl. And it adds just such a human element and emotion to the franchise to see her in this role, that this is like the only person that she cares about anymore is saving this little girl and going on this journey of battling anything that she has to do to save her from having one of these aliens burst out of her chest. And when she saves the day and walks out in the exosuit, delivers her amazing line,
"Get away from her, you bitch!"
It's so satisfying. Which also means when you get to the beginning of Alien 3, it's the ultimate betrayal that a movie has ever delivered. She's able to be strong while being maternal and seeming like a real person, not an action hero, while being one of the ultimate action heroes. So one of my favorites. Our runner-up is James T. Kirk from Star Trek 1 through 6. Now this one is a little bit of a cheat because these 6 movies are a sequel to Star Trek, the original television series, where he had 3 seasons to have his character go on a bunch of adventures, build relationships with other characters. But what these movies did so well was build on that foundation, knowing his relationship to his friends, to his crew, to his ship, to Starfleet. They were able to tell very interesting, deep, compelling stories. Star Trek the Motion Picture, not all that great, but then when you get to Star Trek 2, you get one of the great science fiction films of all time because it's about this aging captain looking back on the regrets and the mistakes he's made and how he's gotten to this point in time in life, and his past comes to haunt him through Khan, and it comes at great consequence to him. Leads into Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, where you have this captain that is just known for dedicating his entire life to Starfleet, and he's willing to put everything on the line because he cares about his friend so much, and there is hope of saving his friend. And then you get to Star Trek 4, and you have a captain that has lost all his rank. He's a criminal at this point in time and still chooses to commit to his responsibility to Starfleet and goes on an adventure to try and get a pair of humpback whales to save mankind. And of course, it leads into Star Trek 6 eventually, where you have him as this aging captain realizing his own biases, that while he has been the hero, he realized he has not been living up to the ideals he's been spreading throughout the galaxy. All of that is when you have a great character. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. You see them go on a journey and change, and you get all of that in Star Trek 2 through 6. He did not appear in Star Trek Generations, and Kirk never died. But coming in at first place is Rocky Balboa. It was actually really tough to put this list together and think through all of my favorite movies and my favorite characters and who's better than who and why. But the one that was easy to pick was Rocky Balboa at number 1. And what I love about this character is that he is the ultimate underdog. At the beginning, he's kind of a loser. He's never had his shot and he's never put himself out there. Then he finds a girl, he finds his confidence, and he actually takes his shot. And in the first movie, he fails at it, but he won the ultimate victory, which is the transformation that he needed to go through. He didn't need to win the fight. He needed to be the best version of himself, and that's who he was by the end of the film. And then you go into the second film and he continues that journey.
Yo, Adrian! I did it!
And then we even jump forward decades later and wanting to go back in the ring, and it just continues to make him that underdog that doesn't need to win. He just needs to be the guy that keeps going one more round. And then they brought him back for the Creed films, and you find him even in these Creed movies like facing his own death and being okay with it, but finding a little bit more to live for and a few more obstacles to overcome, one more way that he's an underdog and can win one more time. So he comes in easily, without question, at number 1. Remember, if you did enjoy this video, there's a companion to it over on my Patreon page. The link is down below in the description. Join at any level and you can see that companion video as well as like 100 other exclusive videos. There's more top 10s right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.